Hey there, my name's John. This is In Air Outdoors, and I wanted to share this with you. I'm really excited about it. I have taken a Chinese diesel heater, which later in the video you'll see an unboxing for, and built it into what's going to work for me as a heater for the truck camper and for a tent. This is a knockoff or a riff on the Planar Diesel Heater. They're a Canadian company who makes basically this, but in their own way. They're also $1,500 to $2,000. I did not spend anywhere close to that on this, maybe $300. A lot of the components were either purchased from Harbor Freight or AliExpress. I got a couple things from Amazon. And I did a couple things to make it my own that isn't really necessary, like this particular connector. I just wanted something kind of fancy where I could plug it in like that. Same with the air intake silencer. It has a whole kit that comes with most of what you need. I added some stuff to make it my own, to make it how I want it to work. So this is the outside. You've got your tank on the back, exhaust on the left, intake on the right, and then this is the output for your heat. You have options of how to set these up. So you can run this controller unit into your domicile. You're going to use it and control it out of there, or you can use the remote. This is the interior of mine. I've got mine set up uniquely to me. I redid the wiring harness to make it work how I wanted it to. I did put, since my air intake is right here for the tent, a carbon monoxide detector inside the case. And then I've got it set up so I can use a remote to turn it on and off, even with the case closed. And I wouldn't say this is waterproof, but it is very water resistant. And while I wouldn't submerge it, I think it would be fine in a rainstorm. So this thing's gonna boot up, and so it's working on its startup process. It takes a few moments, heats up a glow plug, then starts feeding diesel into the burn chamber. At that point, you start to get output. And starting to warm up a little bit. Exhaust is a little warm. I'm gonna let this keep running for a little bit and then bring you back with the microphone real close, just so you can see how loud it is. So I've got the microphone about an arm's length away. There's two sounds you hear with these. You hear the air flow, and that's a lot like what you might hear in your HVAC. And then with this one, it's got a silent pump or a quieter pump. You may hear a slight tick. This is basically going full tilt right now. I'm gonna give it a few minutes to finish warming up. We'll redo the sound check at full tilt, and then I'm gonna drop it down to the low speed, which is probably gonna be enough for my use, and we'll see what that sounds like. All right, so this is ramped up to the heat up cycle. Now this is always placed outside the tent. You don't want this inside. So you can extend the distance away if the sound is too much. And when you add the exhaust direction, the hot air direction pipes, it does muffle it more. So this is the loudest you'd ever hear. So about arm's length away. Depending on what angle you're at, little different sounds. So coming out the back, you got the exhaust. And these mufflers may not really be necessary. It takes it down a little bit. May not truly be necessary. I tried it with just a straight pipe, tried it with the muffler, and yeah, not a huge difference, but the muffler's there, so. And if you listen really close, you might be able to hear that tick. Let me crank it down to the lowest setting it'll be at. And we'll do it again. I'm gonna give it a few minutes to get there because again, it changes, it needs an opportunity to kind of settle. Now, if you're curious about the setting you're on, you can always pop this open and it will say on the display where you're at, where it should. All right, it is at its lowest setting. Now, you can set these up with a thermostat using that large controller. I'm setting up on what's called Hertz mode. So what it's doing is it's changing how frequently it pulses the pump, and that also corresponds with how fast the internal fans run. I just don't want to run a bunch of wires inside the tent, and most people find this to be pretty effective. My carbon monoxide detector also has a thermostat for me, and I'm actually going to have 2 different types in the tent, but this has a thermostat, so I'll be able to see what my temperature is going to be while keeping myself safe. So again, about arm's length away, this is on low, which for most more compact tents, maybe a teardrop trailer, the camper shell I'm going to be using is probably going to be enough to at least get you to a level of warmth where a lighter weight sleeping bag would be appropriate, where you can not completely shiver as soon as you get out of it. I'm not saying it'll be 75 degrees in there, but depending on the size and the external temperature and how much insulation, it could be. Important thing with this type of unit is you do need a specific shutdown process. So don't just pull your plugs. Make sure that there's nothing somebody's going to trip over and yank it out of your battery box. Takes 4 or 5 minutes, maybe. I don't know. I've never timed it. I don't really care to shut down. So it is in shutdown now. And what it does is it turns back on that glow plug to make sure it's really hot in the combustion chamber, while turning off the diesel pump, and that just burns out whatever's still left in there. I did some testing with it, so I've run this for a total of about 16 hours, and that's on high. And I only filled it up to about there at first. So 16 hours on high, probably 5 liters, maybe a gallon and a half of diesel fuel. On low, if my math is correct, this should run like 4 days. Amperage draw is pretty minimal, maybe 1.5 amps on full power. It does draw a lot more, about 12 amps for 2 or 3 minutes at startup and shutdown for the glow plug. But once it gets its combustion cycle started, it's really just running the fan and the diesel pump, which doesn't draw a whole lot. So I got plenty of time with this battery box. You know, probably 100 hours. With my remote, I also have a carbon monoxide detector for inside the tent. But yeah, why don't you hang out and I'll unbox the different parts and have a couple videos where you can see how I put it together. So my wife is really cold-natured. My son is pretty cold-natured too. I really want them to enjoy these activities. I want them to have a place to be able to go to when the adventure's over so they can warm up. And what I have found after hours and hours and hours of research is something called a diesel heater. Now, there are many options on the market through Amazon, through eBay. You'll see a bunch of them if you search on Amazon. And after some pretty extensive research, I've kind of figured out there's kind of 3.5 levels of quality. So there is the originators of this. There's a company called Webasto, Eberspacher, I probably pronounced that wrong, and Airtherm, Autotherm, something like that. And they're in the thousands of dollars. So they're kind of off the table, but that's where you see, that's what the core of the Planar overland heater unit is. That's what you see in a lot of like high-end sprinter vans, things like that. And then on the other end of the spectrum is just the no-name Chinese diesel heater. There are a couple that have names, so Vivor, H. Calori, those are kind of the lowest end. And then you can get a bunch that are like no-name off of AliExpress, through eBay, through Amazon. And they're hit or miss in terms of quality and in terms of the components that come with them. And then in the middle is a company, there's actually two companies that are kind of in the middle that I'm aware of right now. I'm sure there's others, but the big names kind of in the middle where you're getting pretty good quality, good accessories, things like that, where you're still a reasonable value is a company called Lavaner, and they are a Chinese diesel heater company, but they've really focused on making it really higher quality than their competitors. They're sold on AliExpress, and then a company called HLN who actually makes like for OEM installations for construction equipment and buses and vans and things like that. And that's in like the $500 range. I have decided to go with a Lavaner. This is a Lavaner Pro 2 kilowatt option. So gotta have a fuel tank. This is AliExpress. I chose this one because the fuel pickup is on the top, whereas a lot of the Chinese diesel heaters, you actually want, they want you to bore a hole in the side yourself and install your fuel pickup there, and I'm worried about leaking. There is nothing terribly special about this beyond that. So that is what we're gonna use for fuel. I've gotten some exhaust hose wrap. This is silicone with fiberglass on the inside. I'll show you what I'm gonna do with that later. Apparently the fuel filters that come with these are pretty crap. So I did get a higher end fuel filter. This is actually a planar fuel filter. So planar is that kind of like overland specific, use the Autotherm high end stuff. So I actually got a couple of high end components from Planar. So this is one of them, the fuel filter. I may not need it because the fuel tank itself actually has a filter in it. I got this from Autotherm or from Planar as well. This is an exhaust gasket so that the exhaust can go through here and it can go through the bulkhead of a container, and we'll talk about that as well. I got an extra controller to try. This puts a wireless controller in your hand with a display, and then this is what goes in the actual case, so you don't necessarily have to run a big long wire to where you're wanting your system set up. But that's more of a toy to play with. I'm not certain if it's going to be worthwhile doing or not. Bits and bobbles, standoffs if I want to make sure it's not attached to anything well, so kind of a isolator. I'm not so much worried about the vibrations from the unit itself, because it actually doesn't really have a whole lot of concern for vibration. It's not a combustion engine where it's going to be having reciprocating parts. I did get an extra fuel take line. If I'm not happy with the one that comes with that fuel tank, I can use that. Always important, a CO monitor. This is actually pretty cool. It's also something I use when I scuba dive to look for gas in my tanks. I've gotten a case bracket for the fuel pump itself in case it seems like it's going to be too loud. This can offset some of that noise by containing it. It's kind of a hard plastic. I was expecting something silicone rubber. I think it cost me $2, so even if I don't use it, I'm not too terribly worried. I did get what is supposed to be, in case I'm not thrilled with the original that comes with the unit, a silent fuel pump. This one actually has a built-in inline filter. We'll see if I even need this. You can find these on Amazon for like 50 bucks, but through AliExpress, this was like $8. Seems to be pretty well built, but we'll see if I need this, if I'm gonna go with this or not. I did get from, again, the Autotherm people, their intake silencer. And I'll show you what that means compared to what comes in the box. And then the other big piece of the build that doesn't come in the box is Harbor Freight. This is a Apache. I've got two of these. This is a 3800 and I've got a 4800. I think the 3800 is going to be big enough for what I want to do, but we'll see once I open this up and start doing some layout. But this is what the heater is going to go in, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And now for the grand opening. This is again the Lavaner Pro 2 kilowatt, because that's about what I need. So I've heard that the 5 kilowatt or 4 kilowatt options is more than you need for like a rooftop tent, kind of smaller space. Let's see what's in it. So they shipped me a large fuel tank as well. This is the type where you would have to drill the hole in the bottom. At least that's how they have it set up. But if I elect to go this route, I can always use my extra standpipe here and put it in from the top to pick up my fuel. And that's just me trying to avoid any risk of spills. It is going to be too big for the smaller of the two cases. It might be the right size for the larger, so we'll see as I get things opened up. They did provide a layout for any cuttings, so these are really designed so that you can install them in a camper van through the floor of the van. List of bits and bobbles that it comes with, and there. There is the diesel heater itself. So this is what a Chinese diesel heater looks like. Again, there are a couple different sizes. The 4 or 5 kilowatt, depending on how you call it, is about this much longer. Let me finish unpacking here, and then I'll actually move over to the close-up camera, and I think I'm gonna take... There is the wireless controller that this actually comes with, which is supposed to be a very nice one. And then this does have what's called a turret mount, which we may or may not use. So this is designed to go through the floor of a van to allow the heater to be mounted. I think that's all my bits and bobbles in here. We'll get rid of that. Now let's go over to the close-up cam. All right, so this is a Chinese diesel heater. They're all laid out pretty much the same. There are two circuits, or at least what I think of as two circuits. So you have your combustion circuit, and that's these pipes down here, an intake towards the front and an exhaust towards the back, and then the actual forced air circuit for the heating, which intake is over here, exhaust is over here. The idea is, and let's actually open this up so you can see the insides, because it will make a lot more sense of what the idea is when you can see. So unscrew this little filtery thing, unclip, unclip, and then go there. So the idea of these is that you have two circuits again. So you have your combustion intake, and it draws air into this area. It mixes with diesel fuel, which is brought in through this little pipe right here. There's a glow plug to ignite it, and it ignites it all under the control of this controller. When it ignites it, it burns in a cylindrical combustion chamber here, and then kind of the exhaust gas doubles back on itself. So there's actually another fan in here. There's a fan here and a fan here. They're controlled by the same motor. And the fan internal draws the air in, draws it through the combustion chamber, and puts it out the exhaust. And then there is a large heat sink here with lots of fins, both internal and external, so that the air that's drawn through this part goes and passes over it, and then the hot air comes out there. So kind of simple, kind of not. This particular unit, the Lavaners, they pot their control unit, and that was a big kind of concern of mine, since I plan on having this more exposed to the elements. Apparently they also double balance their fan units, so you can see there's some balancing clips here. That's spinning pretty smoothly. They're supposed to use a higher end glow plug. I think it's a I don't know, I can't pronounce it. But they're supposed to use a higher end glow plug that is less likely to fail. The electronics are supposed to be just a little bit better than the standard Chinese diesel heater. And then their bits and bobbles, all the other pieces they come with are also supposed to be better. So when we open that up, we'll take a closer look at it. And something to know about these is there's no pump inside of them. So the fuel is actually managed by an external pump that wires up with that controller unit and the unit itself. So going forwards in here, let's see what all we got. So this is the exhaust pipe. It is a kind of corrugated, rolled something or other. Nothing exciting about it. This is supposed to be the higher quality version of it. They also make kind of just a simple steel with little ridges. So, but this is supposed to be a better version. This is similar to what the really high-end Autotherms Webasto's use. So we will definitely be using that. They gave me some spare parts. So these are screens that go around the glow plug, and these are gaskets for the internals if I needed to take this apart. So those will hopefully never be needed or be needed later. One of the things the Lavaners include with their kit that's missing in a lot of others is this hard nylon fuel hose. So a lot of the kits have a green, like silicone type fuel hose, and apparently it gets problematic. It degrades over time. And because of the suction of the pump, it can squeeze shut and cause issues. So in troubleshooting, one of the first things recommended for those cheaper diesel heaters is to get some of this stuff to avoid that potential problem. Now there is another aspect of this stuff that is important. Let me see if I can find it. There we go. So the other aspect of this stuff is that you need little bits of this fuel hose to connect it, because it is rigid and it's not going to allow you to spread it over anything. So this kit comes with that quite a bit. It also has, this is supposed to be a higher quality filter than available with the base units. Doesn't look anything crazy special to me, but it does look fairly well made. This is also, I think, a water separator version too. So I may or may not use this because, again, the tank I've got actually has a fuel filter in the base, but we'll see. Another thing that the Lavaner is supposed to have that's a drastic improvement over the other cheaper ones are these. The British call them Jubilee clips. In the cheaper versions, they come with more of the standard hose clamps, but apparently they're extremely poorly made. So kind of the standard hose clamp but for the fuel, and they're extremely poorly made in those cheaper versions. So this can be a big upgrade. These are clamps for the exhaust and intake to mount it to this bit, and then to mount different bits and pieces to it. There's also a hanger to be able to attach it. Looks like this one got a little crushed. I will actually email them and see how good their customer service is. There's a guy based in the US that is managing a lot of this stuff, so hopefully that won't be an issue. Other hardware, this is for your hose routing. I think it's a 60 millimeter for the stuff. And then this is the fuel pump that comes with this kit. Again, we may switch this out for something else. We'll see. It looks better made than the aftermarket one. Just the tolerances look better. We'll see. One of the complaints a lot of people have with these is they click. So you go tick, 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 tick. And there are silent upgrades available. There are other ways of dealing with them. So we'll try this one out, see what I think. This is a rubber bracket so that it hopefully will not do that rattle. Alrighty. Let's see what else we got in here. Here is the exhaust silencer itself. Now, some of these don't even use this. So like the Planar Autotherm one, it actually doesn't use one of these. It just goes straight out with this. This one is one of the higher quality ones because it actually has packing inside of it and has an actual S-bend. You'll see some of the cheaper versions of this. And the really cheap Planar Diesel Heater is just a straight pipe with some holes in the side. Now, this should not go inside, and I see a lot of people make this mistake, this should not go inside that case if you're gonna have any air drawn from inside the case, because this isn't perfectly sealed. It's spot welded. It actually has a drain hole for condensation. So if you're having anything drawn from inside the case, like the combustion air or the breathing air, then this really needs to be outside the case. I'm going to try without this since that's how the Planar does it, and then I'll try it with it if I feel like I need to. Have some ducting. Looks like there's a break. Again, I'll contact the manufacturer. I'm not really planning on using this. I don't really care that much, but you know, it's good for them to know that there's some damage. Through a T if I need it. This is the intake air vent hose. It's a foil-coated cardboard. This is pretty standard across all of them, even the higher ends. And then same with the air output hose. Has a little bit of give to it. I'm probably going to mostly use this for connections inside the case to the external aspect of it rather than to go to the tent. They gave me 2 of them. This is their intake silencer and filter. So you can see it does actually have a filter in it, and then serviceable. I did get that Planar one to try instead if I want to, but we'll see. They sent me some exhaust hose wrap as well, which is awesome. It's a little bit bigger diameter than the stuff I have, still maybe super useful. They sent a fuel standoff pipe too. This one's actually for, I think, a metal tank. So you could, if you had a diesel Sprinter, a diesel vehicle, you could actually tap into your actual exhaust tank for this. I don't know how you'd get in there to tighten this up though, but yeah, that's the idea. There's probably options for this in like lids of other tanks, stuff like that. It looks very well made, but I probably won't need that. A couple other bits and bobbles for mounting. I think this is for mounting the fuel tank. And I don't know if you heard it earlier, the fuel tank actually has a rattle to it. That is because the bits and pieces for it are inside. This is the wiring harness for the system, and I am probably going to upgrade this a little bit and modify it to suit my needs. But I've heard good things. This one's supposed to be pretty long. There is an inline fuse. I think that's a 15 amp to go to your battery. And then you have your connector for your fuel pump, your connector for the main unit, and your connector for the controller. And actual real life, honest to God manual. Looks to be in actual English. has clearances. There's the two sizes, so you can see this one's 340 centimeters. The bigger one's 380 centimeters. Tells you how to do stuff. Mounting, fastening. Talks you through exhaust and intake. Then we have our mounting bracket. So this goes on the bottom of the unit. I'm going to bend it over 90 degrees so it will mount onto the side of the case. And that's it. That's what's in the case.
No roar!